Welcome to Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Choo. My name is Gabe Estel, and I'm here with my excellent co-hosts, Dennis Levi Leach and Jonathan Getz. Happy Saturday, fellas.
Indeed.
Hola.
Yeah, good to see you. Beautiful weather, I think probably where all of us are. Everybody's loving it.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
this is lucky episode number 7, and the theme for tonight really is All Star Game. And the All Star Game just happened a little bit less than a week ago. Actually, I thought pretty decent game this year. I caught about the last 4 innings I got to see, and yeah, I didn't mind. It was one of those years I didn't mind watching it. But we're going to talk about sort of the state of the All Star Game in 2014. You know, the merits and probably some futility of it as well. So we'll talk about those things a little bit later. So, but we've also are going to pitch our starting lineups for our all-star teams. And as I was thinking about this today, they're kind of more. I said all-star team, you know, sort of fitting with the theme, but they're kind of more like our all Madden teams. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Guys that have this certain tenacity and sort of skills that we value, you know, as music fans, and probably our picks, you know, obviously they sort of they convey our individual taste as well. Although I'm sure I probably wouldn't kick anybody out that you guys pick of my band. So those are going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that. And then, but first, before we talk about those things, I want to get Levi's thoughts a little bit on really the biggest trade that's happened so far during the sort of the trading season portion of the year. And as we know, the Cubs traded their ace in Jeff Samardzija. So it's not every trading deadline where, you know, somebody's a really viable number one is traded. You know, trade deadlines always have, you know, there's always a lot of activity and contenders and buyers and sellers. But, you know, you rarely do you have like an ace, you know, somebody who's like hands down the best pitcher on their team get traded. And that happened with Zach Greinke a few years ago in Kansas City when he was traded to the Brewers. And then so this deal kind of reminds me of that. So I wanted to get Levi's thoughts on it. The Cubs in this move keep stockpiling prospects. You know, this is really becoming a strong farm system that has a lot in the pipeline, but unfortunately,
Yeah, it
Cubs
does.
now not a lot of that on the field yet, other than a couple players. So Levi, I know you were on social media. You were upset.
Yeah. My gut reaction. I was really upset.
Yeah,
I,
tell
I
us
was I was really upset. Just
on this.
it, in my mind, my initial reaction was we just traded our two best pitchers
Right.
for prospects, and
Not to mention Jason Hamill was in the deal too.
yeah. And so while the prospect we did get, what is it, Addison Russell? He's projected to be one of the best prospects, you know, in the league, and he's doing well so far for the Cubs already. But in my prospects, to me, are prospects. There's a chance they might not make it, or there's a chance that they might make it and be the next Jerome Walton, where they have like one career year as a rookie or their second year, and then after that they fizzle. Or prospects can get to the highest level in AAA and then blow out their hamstring and then maybe not play again for another year or so or two, and then that they got to start up over again, you know, with all of that. And so the reaction was yes, I was really upset because part of that too was seeing kind of the last of the old Cubs guard leave, which was Samardzija. He was basically the longest tenured player I think that was on the Cubs. And so, you know, looking back now on it a couple weeks after it's happened, I don't know if I've made peace with it, but I mean, I've had to accept it. So,
It seemed inevitable. You know what I mean?
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and Theo says that this will be the last year that we're sellers, and we'll see how that goes. And I read a really interesting article on Comcast Sportsnet, and it was on there yesterday, and it was, I'm going to quote from it here. It was entitled, "Was Thursday the biggest day in Theo Epstein's tenure with the Cubs?" And some people might find it funny because the Cubs didn't even play Thursday. But what they're referring to is Thursday in the minor leagues. Here are the stats from that one day. Okay, in Chile, Chris Bryant and Javier Baez both hit home runs.
This is on
So did
AAA. Sorry to interrupt. This is on
yeah, yeah,
AAA. Okay.
yeah. Those two guys were in AAA, and then the rest of these are, I think, in Double A or Single A. So those two guys hit homers. Addison Russell, the pick we just got from Oakland, hit a home run. Jorge Soler hit a home run, and Dan Vogelbach. So one, two, three, four, five of our prospects hit home runs that day. And then Baez, he got his first game at second base because they're saying they're going to be calling him up to play alongside Starlin Castro because Darwin Barney's days, I guess, are finished with us. He's, basically about to leave it at any point, or we're going to put him down in AAA or something. And so we also had two pitchers that are little known prospects for us, but they had really good days that day as well. Corey Black, he picked up a victory, struck out 8, and he was acquired when I guess the deal with Alfonso Soriano with the Yankees, somehow we got this pick in that deal. And then Fujikawa, the relief pitcher for the Cubs, had a really good outing that day. And so I can see where the things that Theo has done and that he is doing are actually producing. As a Cubs fan, it will never be soon enough.
Right.
That's just the attitude I've had to accept because it seems like I mean I don't want to be pessimistic, but we had a really great farm system in the 80s. Did that get us any World Series? Right. We had Rafael Palmeiro, we had Greg Maddux, we had Mark Grace, we had we had studs.
Yeah.
And so I just hope that this time it works, I guess, for us.
Had Brooks Kieschnick, but But right. No, man, it's got to be frustrating because obviously, when you're trading your best players, and really one thing I wanted to mention before we move on, the Cubs' payroll this year is $89 million, which actually puts them closer to the bottom of the payroll scale, where just a few years ago they were near the top.
Yeah, when Theo took over, it's like 140.
Where's all that money going? Because
Ricketts
right,
pockets.
Right. Because the payroll, I just wonder how it's distributed because a team in this large of a market, and I guess you could say this for the White Sox as well, they shouldn't be like in the bottom near payroll. And the White Sox are near the bottom too. They're just a few the Cubs are a couple slots ahead of them, I think. Or no, White Sox, I'm sorry, higher payroll than the Cubs, just by a couple $1 million. But it's got to be frustrating, and also I think that with the Cubs, it's like you mentioned, the history of prospects, but also the fact that this is all kind of a crapshoot with prospects, and when you keep stockpiling them and you're relying on them now, as opposed to being players in the free agent market, which the Cubs really haven't been since they shed all those contracts. It can get frustrating. But anyway, so moving on, though, let's talk about the good players and our players. With these lineups, like I said earlier, these are sort of musicians that are unique to us. And we shared each other's picks just a few minutes ago, and we'll share them with you now. A lot of people didn't pick like the really obvious choices. Nobody picked like Jimi Hendrix, or Robert Plant or Keith Moon or something like that. So that was nice. That was nice to see, and I kind of expected it as well. So just to tell everybody at home what the criteria is, I made up a list, like a starting lineup card, with including the DH. So just like the All Star lineups, as managers, we were kind of filling out these. And there was criteria for each position. And I'll share that criteria now. First baseman needed to be a rhythm guitarist, so your riff master. Second base needed to be a lead vocalist. The shortstop was the lead guitarist. Okay, the third baseman is the keyboard player. The catcher is the drummer. Left field is your lyricist. And in center field, you're dealing with a session musician. So that should be interesting. In right field is sort of the personality of the band, the showboater. The DH is the shredder. So sort of a more heavy metal guitarist, hard rock guitarist. And then the starting pitcher is the bass player. So we're going to go ahead and go through these, and everybody can just give a little bit of explication on the, sort of why you pick this person as your musician in that slot. So anyway, we're not really sure if bands would ever, if all these musicians could get in the same room.
It could be a disaster. It could be an absolute
disaster. Yeah.
For more reasons than just musically.
So it's more likely a disaster probably than monumental. Yeah, personalities and skills, and yeah. But anyway, so Levi, why don't you go ahead and go through your lineup here?
Okay.
Or I don't know if it would be. Should we? We didn't talk about this earlier. Should we go through them, position by position, one for each of us, kind of round robin, or should we just go over our lineup card top to bottom, respectively?
Let's go through the lineup, each lineup individually.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
All right, Levi, let it rip, man.
Alrighty. At first base, my rhythm guitarist is the rhythm guitarist from this band right behind me, the Black Crowes, Rich Robinson. And I've just always liked his chord patterns, the way he does the rhythms to songs, and so I think he would be really good.
Open G tunings.
Yeah.
Lots of open tunings.
Second base, vocalist for the band is going to be Steve Winwood. And the reason I picked that is just he's one of my favorite singers of all time. Oh. Traffic is one of my favorite bands of all time, Blind Faith. He's one of those people, as soon as you hear a song he's singing, you're like, that's Steve Winwood. You can tell right away. And at shortstop, on lead guitar, I have Brad Whitford of Aerosmith. And the reason, 2 words, Last Child. Mm-hmm. The guitar solo. It's one of my favorite guitar solos of all time. Third base on keys, to complement Steve Winwood, I have Bruce Hornsby as well. So I think maybe Steve and Bruce could trade off once in a while. If one guy's sore one day and wants to play second or something, And left field, the lyricist for the band, writing all the lyrics, Neil Young. And the reason I chose him is just he has so many ways to convey emotions in songs. He's just one of the great word artists of our times with lyrics. And so at Fairfield, for session musician, I had to think about this a little bit, but I came back to this guy right here, Jeff the Skunk Baxter, the man with the nicest ponytail, mustache, beret combo you will find in rock and roll.
He also kind of looks like that guy on WKRP in Cincinnati.
A little bit. Go ahead. That guy on WKRP looks like Jeff the Skunk Baxter, my friend. Yeah. He jammed with Steely Dan. He jammed with Loggins and Messina, I guess, back in the day at certain times. He played with everybody. He was all over the place. He was a jet setter. And so in right field, for our showboater, frontman personality guy, I picked Phil Lynott of Lizzie. And I always thought he had a really unique vibe that no one has come along since then and gave that kind of, I don't know, just like a real, maybe the closest thing to it would be maybe some of the punk guys, but it was street cred he seemed to have as a gutter punk Irish guy or something, And
he was really tight with Johnny Thunders. Like him and Johnny Thunders were really tight, so that lends to his street cred right there,
Yeah. On drums, holding it down in center field, we got Joey Kramer of Aerosmith. I happen to pick 2 guys from Aerosmith. And I just have always liked Joey Kramer. He's rock solid as a drummer. I was going to pick Steve from the Black Crowes, but that would have been too easy for me just because I love him and he's a great drummer. But designated hitter for my shredder metal guitarist. I thought about this for a little while because there's a lot of really good ones out there. And the one I settled on was Zakk Wylde. And some people may say, oh, he's not necessarily a shredder, but I think he is. You know, his first incarnation with Ozzy, he had like huge hair and was
Right.
like skinny. He was skinny as a bean, and
Yeah.
he stood up there and shredded all night. I
Well,
mean,
also,
he
yeah, I
kind of
mean,
does that now.
he had to play Randy Rhoads solos,
Yeah,
I mean, so yeah,
exactly. Oh yeah, and if you think
that will
yeah,
provoke shredding, So,
if you
yeah.
want to hear a great early version of him shredding is the solo to "I Don't Want to Change the World" by Ozzy. The solo on that is awesome, and so go check that one out on YouTube. And so for bass player, I have James Jamerson. And some people may not know him. James Jamerson was a bass player for the Motown scene. He did all the bass on Stevie Wonder's early records. He did a lot of the bass on like Temptations or anybody who was basically in the Motown studios. He played bass on their record. He's uncredited on like hundreds of albums, and I just have always liked his bass style. He had a really unique finger picking style, and an example of that, if you want to check him out, is the "I Was Made to Love Her" bass line for Stevie Wonder's song.
Hmm.
And so to lead that ragtag bunch of guys for manager, I picked a gentleman named Brendan O'Brien. And Brendan
Uh-huh.
O'Brien is a producer who helped create these two records right behind me, who were two great records, you know, well-known albums in their time. And it just seemed like if you look him up on Wikipedia and look at his discography, there's an album you're gonna like.
It's
You know,
ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's
Deep resume.
done something for everybody, but he's done the sounds of the night. I cherish as a musician and fan, and so I think he'd be a great manager or a coach for all those guys.
Yeah, Brendan O'Brien is it's just interesting. I mean, he has produced some of my all-time favorite records, and he's also produced records I will never listen to.
Yeah,
Like Limp
yeah,
Bizkit.
oh, yeah.
Right.
That's why it's like he's done something for everybody.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, he's one of the best, man.
Undoubtedly.
Um, yeah, yeah, good choices, man. Yeah, I really like the Aerosmith choices as well. They're so those guys are all I think kind of under the guys you mentioned, sort of the the guys in the band that aren't Joe Perry and Steven
Yeah, the
Tyler.
unsung. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
definitely.
really unsung heroes and really solid and underrated, I think, as well. And with Winwood, he's so versatile. I mean, he could also play the guitar if you wanted him to.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Little mandolin too.
Oh yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
He could even get back in the high life. Seriously.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, no,
Yes.
with him and Hornsby on the team, I'm looking for like a 15-minute mandolin rain with those two guys.
Right. Yeah, now that I hear Winwood's '80s output, it doesn't sound as bad as like it did then.
Oh no,
Or
yeah,
yeah, I mean,
a lot
I
of
can
those
kind of even
80s
get
records.
behind Roll With It. I think it's a fun tune.
I'm that way with Eric Clapton's '80s output. His '80s output has definitely taken time to grow on me.
Hey,
But
running on faith,
I,
man, absolutely.
oh yeah, well, just yeah, tearing us apart, man. With Tina Turner, I love that song. I don't know why. It's got like the most cheesiest '80s clap track in it, but I can't get enough of it.
Clapton in the '80s is a guilty pleasure of mine. Yes.
You
Yeah.
figure everybody was playing on those songs, playing bass with like the one that doesn't have the
No,
tuning.
no headstock, no headstock bass.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no headstock at the top of it. Yeah.
Steinberg.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Playing hard loving, try to be your hard loving one.
Oh
Yeah, yes, definitely. Good stuff, man, all around. Yeah, definitely. Jonathan, what about you, man? Go over your team.
It's interesting to hear how you guys approach this and how versus how I was thinking about it. And I went a bit harder and more versatile, I think, in some ways, where I took guys that I knew could step in and like go play another position if I needed them to at a moment's notice. And
Right.
so I may have thought about it a little too hard in terms of how this would translate to baseball and late innings situations. So, and I also I think I skewed for some positions. I intentionally went younger, because I think the young guys deserve a shot. Eventually. At first base, rhythm guitarist Jerry Cantrell, Alice in Chains guitarist, very versatile, and also obviously he can shred in his own right. But and also a very underrated vocalist. So he's but Cantrell's songs that he's written in the past, since 1990. I mean, those are some of the greatest songs of the last 20, 25 years. Easy.
Oh,
yeah. Totally underrated songwriter. Second base,
yeah.
The second base vocalist. I skewed younger on this one. Matt Berninger from the National, deep baritone, and I think both in the studio and live, one of the best vocalists today.
You're big on those guys, man.
I am, yeah, and it's weird.
Yeah.
Like, I will never, if there's like a top, 10 or 20 bands that I'm listening to, I rarely think of the National, but then if it's like breaking it down, I always mention them, and it's like they should be up there, but for some reason they always fall underneath my own radar, no matter how much I listen to them. So, and shortstop lead guitarist Tommy Bolin.
Yeah.
Tommy's obviously his work in the 70s, Teaser, Private Eyes, phenomenal records.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, excellent choice, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I had considered him too, man. I mean, that guy could play, and just where you could fit him,
Right.
he could play with Bowie, or he could play in Skinnerd. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, like that's
Yep, and that's exactly why
he had
I
a
wanted.
personality. Yeah.
Oh,
he had
yeah,
a personality
great
to go with
stage
it, too.
presence. Yeah,
Definitely. And yeah, and again, it comes down to that versatility. I want him on my team. Third baseman keyboardist Ben Montench from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and Ben Mont's work. I mean, it's the keyboard work, but at the same time, it's not keyboard heavy. Always.
Yeah.
So he
subtle but effective. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He adds those fills. And he's also worked with his fair share of musicians other than the Heartbreakers. Left field lyricist, one of my favorite songwriters, Kevin Kenny. Lead singer of Driving and Crying, and also his own solo work, which I prefer. Driving and Crying, I love, one of my favorite rock bands. But Kevin Kenny's solo stuff is probably some of my favorite singer-songwriter, quote-unquote, music. And Broken Hearts and Auto Parts, I highly recommend it to anybody out there who's never listened to Kevin Kenny. Kevin, hold the eye. Center field, session musician. Went with Donald Duck Dunn, bass player.
Excellent. Nice. Good choice.
Yeah, Booker T and the MGs. Also worked with Petty. Also, actually, I didn't realize this. He did he was the bass player during Dylan's 30th anniversary Madison Square Garden show. For all of those that they eventually released as a double disc.
Oh, yeah.
So for everybody that came up there. What's that, Levi?
Played with more recently he was Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young's touring bassist on
Worked
one
with
of
Neil
those
Young quite
recent
a bit.
tours.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I saw him in 2002, and I don't know if he was playing with them that night, but he was playing with them. And then, like you said, he played with Neil too.
Oh yeah, and just passed away a couple years ago.
Right.
Right field, the showboater personality, Mark Bolan, T-Rex. I think he was the forerunners of glam in some ways, but at the same time, just absolute rock and roll. He could also add that songwriting and just straight up pop songwriting potential.
Oh yeah, he had a great pop presence.
Oh, man,
yeah.
just ridiculous. But at the same time, really kind of spacey and like from another planet in many ways. So that's
Yeah.
And
uh,
it's fun to have two guys in your team with the last name Bolin.
two Bolins, and actually
True.
that would be
Felt
an
a little
interesting
bit.
pairing, no
And both
doubt.
died around the same time, too.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, uh, the catcher, drummer. I skewed younger on this one as well. From my morning jacket, Patrick Callahan. Um,
Wow.
Patrick, he pounds the skins. He's quite enigmatic back there, and
Beautiful head of hair, too.
oh, dude, yeah,
It's really
he's
he's got some flowing locks, man.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah, that guy's
yeah,
great.
yeah. He's not shy, and when it comes to drumming, so quite bombastic. DH, shredder, metal guitarist. I cheated a little bit here. I went more kind of fusion and relatively speaking, and took Tom Morello, Rage Against the Machine. And granted, he's not straight up shredder or metal, but he hints at it quite a bit.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And he gives me that versatility I'm looking for in my lineup and in the field.
Oh yeah.
But and it'd be interesting to pair him with Jerry Cantrell
Sure.
at the same time. Again, I don't know if these things would actually work in real life, but in
yeah.
theory, yeah, sure, why not? To starting
I'd
pitcher.
be willing to listen.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, absolutely. It's it'd be worth a little something. A starting pitcher, bassist. I went back and forth on this, so I cheated a little bit. In that I also have a closing pitcher. My starting pitcher bassist is Rick Danko of the band. Danko's. What? Gosh, what can you say? Not just his bass playing, but also again his vocals. It makes no difference.
Songwriting,
yeah, songwriting, absolutely. He can take you 8 strong innings, no doubt. If you need him to.
Yeah.
And actually, his solo shows
could handle his partying as well.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
I could never keep up with Danko. I would be like going to bed at that too.
The best clips are the Festival Express DVD. I don't know if you've ever seen that,
right.
but it's from the 1970 concert where they took the train across Canada. There are shots of him just so plastered, singing and playing at like the top of his lungs on that train.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. None of us could keep up with Danko.
Yeah.
No.
But
Combined.
oh God, no. And I went back and forth, but I thought a good closing pitcher / bassist. If you need somebody just to come in there and shut the place down, Mike Watt. Mike Watt
Nice.
of the Minutemen and Firehose is. His energy is pretty unparalleled on stage, and he's still getting it done. He's been doing this for 30 years now, and
his studio works great too.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, like his solo albums are awesome.
Yeah. Contemplating
Really
the
good
Engine
stuff.
Room is as far as like rock opera gets thrown around quite a bit, but it is it has a theme, so I guess you could consider it a rock opera. But Contemplating the Engine Room is awesome. I mean, and I saw that played in its entirety with Mudhoney opening that show. That's one of my favorite shows of all time, actually. So then our manager or producer, I totally cheated on this one as well, and took a producer of some of my favorite albums of the last 20 years, Wilco. Wilco self-produced several of their records, either on their own or in tandem with somebody, and Wilco's production skills would bring quite a bit to the table, and they had this ear where and I wanted to get Nels Cline in there into my lineup somehow, or Jeff Tweedy as a lyricist even. But I thought, no,
And
I can
Tweety,
just take them all.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. Tweedy is, I think, a really underrated lead guitarist too. When he does play lead,
yeah.
He's really good, man.
Oh, he is
as a guitarist.
Yeah,
As a songwriter, most people know that, but as a guitarist, he's great.
Yeah, he's I for a while, I didn't know what he could do, and then all of a sudden, I heard some of it, and I was like, "Oh, well, that's very kind of Neil Young." He has very much of a Neil Young mindset when he solos. And then also, I heard Television. I was like, "Oh, Television." It was a big influence on Jeff Tweedy's soloing, so yeah, Wilco as a whole would bring quite a bit to the table as being a producer. I like the idea of. Manager by committee as well. So yeah, that's the lineup.
Nice. Very nice, man. Good choices all around.
Thanks.
I like the Wilco pick too, as a band producing. Yeah, especially Sansone. Is that how you say it?
Pat Sansone. Yeah.
Patrick.
Yeah.
That guy's really good, and good stuff, man.
Thanks.
Well, I'll go over my lineup here, and it's funny. A lot of the picks that gets mentioned were people that I had on my bench, and I think somebody Levi mentioned as well. I could almost consider just about everybody, except for maybe the bass player Tom, right, in my morning jacket. I thought about just because I think those guys are so good. I think sorry, the bass was Tom. But yeah, I thought about Patrick and Jim James, and then. And Carl and Bo as well. I think Jim James and Carl are an underrated guitar duo as well. Those guys are, those guys are really tearing it up.
If those guys needed to sub in Skinnerd for a night, they could.
They could.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it at all.
Yeah, and it would be the best Skinnerd shows since the crash, basically. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. But anyway, so I'll start with mine here, and with the rhythm guitarist as well, I thought about Rich. So yeah, Levi had some picks as well that I had considered heavily. But with rhythm guitarist, I went with a guy that I want to wish him well, because I've heard he's not been feeling too well over the last year or so, is Malcolm Young. And he's just a guy I picked because he's a riff master. For 40 years now, that guy has been putting out killer riffs, and there's not a lot of variance among them. But that's good. That's reassuring, There's only so many people who could write the same play on the same riff, or different plays on the same riff, for 40 years and have it be, worth a damn and still sound good. And he does. The guy just knows how to write a riff, a hard rock riff. And so he's consistent, and underrated, I think, as well. He deserves to be mentioned in that classic rock pantheon of people who are still alive and still kicking ass, and he doesn't always get it, or he's overshadowed by Angus, yeah. But anyway, and then for my second baseman, my vocalist, I went. This is probably my biggest bad pun kind of curveball in the lineup. He's a lead singer for a band I like a lot, but not necessarily one of my favorite bands, but I certainly dig him. He's the lead singer for Primal Scream, named Bobby Gillespie. And I always thought he had a really, really good stage presence, too. And just Primal Scream is a band that I don't think anybody can really go from blues to techno almost, just during the same live performance. So that's why I chose him as well. Just his range and really the type of music that he leads them through is great. And he's also got that sort of, he's very snake-like. He's got that sort of Chris Robinson, Rod Stewart, Robert Plant. All those really snaky lead singers, Axl, to a certain degree, all those guys, he's sort of like them as well. So I just always really dug that guy. Great bluesy voice too. My keyboardist, I chose Eddie Harsh. This is probably, I assume, a choice that all of us mulled over.
I only didn't choose it because
so
I
I'm the
knew
one
you
that
would.
Yeah, I'm the one that picked him. So I got him. Glad I got Ed on my team. And for me, he's just his work really defines two of my favorite records that were back to back, Southern Harmony and Amorica, particularly Amorica, because I think if you take him out of that album, it's a completely different record. It just it would it's to me it's one of the
he
best
provided
records.
a lot of layers.
Yeah, it's one of the best records of the last. It's one of the best records ever for me, but particularly of the last 20 years. He really, his signature is just all over it. So his work, particularly on those two albums, and also his personality, and then how great he was live. All those factors contribute to selecting him. My left fielder is from a band that was previously mentioned. I chose Mike Campbell. To me, he's also a really, like Ben Mont, also a really underrated presence. I mean, you ask anybody, who's some of the greatest guitarists of the last years, and a lot of people might not mention him when they should, because his work's just so consistent, and he's really the anchor. I think one of the anchors in such a great band in the Heartbreakers. Yeah. So I always loved Mike Campbell's work. He's great live too. For my lyricist, this was a little bit tougher because I wanted to go a little bit, even though they've been around now for probably 20 years. Wanted to go more recent. I chose Doug Marsh from Built to Spill. As a lyricist, I really like all the themes he deals with. They're clever, his lyrics, really, I think starting with Keep It Like a Secret and From On is just his lyrics are really great, and he's also a great guitarist too. Really, that's the tandem in Built to Spill is right up there with My Morning Jacket and Wilco for and Pearl Jam and whoever Rich and whoever the Crows, whoever plays in the Crows, I guess. All those guys, they're right up there too. They're just two great guitarists. So Brett something is the other guy's name. I forgot. He's really good.
Yeah, Keep It Like a Secret. It's so sneaky good. I mean, it's the guitars on that are just phenomenal.
Yeah, great stuff, and again, a great lyricist. For my session musician, my center fielder, I went with Elliot Randall. Often cited as providing one of the best guitar solos of all time in Reelin' in the Years, and he also turned down the opportunity to be sort of a bigger name, which is, I'm sure, I guess he's got his own reasons, but he always wanted to stay a session musician. Steely Dan offered him to join the band permanently, and Steely Dan's always kind of been Becker and Fagan and a rotating cast of people. His solo on that, and then he did some work with Frampton. He did a lot of work in the 70s, and I think still is doing some production work today. If you go on YouTube, there's a video. He played with Steely Dan in London back in 2009. He sat in on Reelin' in the Years, and the quality's not that good, but people are going crazy. Like somebody jumps on stage, which probably I can't imagine you see a lot at a Steely Dan concert. So people are really stoked about Elliot Randall playing such a good solo. Jimmy Page said it was his favorite rock and roll solo of all time. So I agree with his taste. It is one of the best. For my showboater, this was pretty obvious. This was like the most obvious choice to me. It has to be the pride of Indiana, David Lee Roth. I mean, what he lacked in singing ability, he more than made up for in his stage presence and just being. He's a carnival barker. You know what I mean? That's what David Lee Roth is. David Lee Roth is a carnival barker. He's Groucho Marx hosting a wet T-shirt contest. All right, that is David Lee Roth. And he was it was probably like one of my earliest musical heroes.
Oh, yeah.
After seeing the jump video when I was 5 years old, I was trying to do the kicks, and
Oh, yeah.
he just had this magnetism.
Oh, yeah. The
Um,
California girls
yeah,
and
yeah. I
just the
loved how
gigolo
cheesy. I love how
videos.
cheesy
Yeah.
he is.
Yeah.
It's like it's all
Yeah. I
it's
just
all
ate it
so
up
Vegasy,
with a spoon.
but it's just I love every minute of it. Um, he's funny, I mean, dude's always good for a soundbite. So yeah, Diamond Dave, absolutely. And then for my catcher, I went with someone from one of my favorite bands. So maybe this isn't, this choice might be obvious for me, but maybe the reason that I chose him is something I don't think he gets credited for enough. I chose Peter Criss because Peter Criss had a jazz background, and he really brought you have to listen closely, but he really brought that to the first few Kiss records, probably like the first 3 records or so, which a lot of people don't really hear. But yeah, he had such a good sort of swing almost to his drumming that I don't think he gets enough attention for. So I chose Peter Criss for his jazz influence in a band that doesn't really have a lot to do with jazz. And then for my DH, for my shredder, I base this. You guys chose Zakk Wylde, and John Levi chose Zakk Wylde, and Jonathan chose Tom Morello. Like, both really great guitarists, and that isn't to say this guy isn't a great guitarist too. It's just his body of work isn't as good as Zakk Wylde's or Tom Morello's. But I chose him as sort of, I think he reflects like the best type of guitarist in an era where there was a lot of really guitar overkill. I chose Warren DeMartini of Rat because, like, of that ilk, he's my favorite guitarist of that ilk. To me, Rat always had, even though they were sleazy and didn't have a lot to say in their lyrics or anything like that, always like the best of that bunch. And I think a lot of it has to do with his guitar work, as well as the guitar work for Robin Crosby, who passed away about 10 years ago, or a little more than 10 years ago. So yeah, I've always felt like
he's a good shredder.
Yeah, like in an era that like has some acts that are tough to defend.
Well, yeah.
Like his playing ability was really good for that type of playing. Yeah. But anyway,
it's hard to stand out when everyone has a neon-colored zebra stripe guitar.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'll defend Rat. All right, Built to Spill and Rat. That's what I'm about. Okay, you guys should know that by now. Okay, for my starting pitcher, I chose Lemmy. He could also fit into the showboater personality, although Lenny doesn't really showboat. It's still a big personality in a Lemmy way. And also Lemmy, I was watching this documentary. I don't know if you guys seen that documentary on Lemmy, the one that was made a couple of years ago. It's really good. Slash was interviewed, and he said that Lemmy has this sort of R&B Motown influence that you don't always hear in his playing, but if you listen closely, it's there. And the documentary kind of breaks it down for a second, and it's like, yeah, wow, Lemmy does have like an R&B influence on his playing, even in Motorhead. And just, God, the guy's like pushing 70, and I mean, he's the same Lemmy, So yeah, when your voice was never that great to begin with, your voice never worsens, really.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah, same thing with Tom Waits. Tom Waits will always sound good because he never sounded good, but he's awesome. He's Tom Waits. Yeah. So anyway, my last choice is the manager for our producer. I chose a guy who also passed away a few years ago, and his body of work, really, everybody from Aretha Franklin to Leonard Skinner to Derek and the Dominoes. I chose Tom Dowd. Probably one of the most storied producers of the 70s, and it's just such a resume. I'm not going to go over all of it, but I just mentioned some of the range within that resume, and just a great producer. And sounded like a pretty good guy too, from what everyone said. So Tom Dowd gets my vote.
Allman Brothers Band as well.
Yeah, Allman's as well. Yeah, leading this block here.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. So great
Nice.
choices all around,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
As these teams,
Yeah, that
I'll
was
post
fun.
these on the Facebook page too, so everybody can see them. One question I wanted to ask you guys: if there's anybody, is there anybody like in a band that you don't really either maybe you don't dig them or you're not that familiar with them that you would put on your team maybe as like somebody on the bench? You know, like anybody on like a band that you might not be too keen on. You don't have to hate them. That would make the team. I've got one, so I'll start us off. I really like he's the cousin in Kings of Leon. Like, I think that kid's work, he's probably like 30 now. That guy's work, that guy's work stands out in like what has become a mediocre band. And even like a band I really don't like anymore, even though when I really like their early work. But he's good. Like, I think his work, like take him out and they really kind of suck right now. So I always, even though they're a popular band and he would probably never, I don't know if he'd ever leave. I'd like to see that guy play in a different band. You know, like to see him play with a band I dig, would be really interesting.
Have any of them done any side projects?
I think the bass player did something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know how what other work they've done since Kings of Leon started. So I would choose him. I don't know if you guys got anybody. If you don't, we can always post it online later. But yeah,
it's a good question. And I bet that there are some, but it's gosh, with a lot of this. It's a whole tree falling in the forest. If nobody is there to hear it, does it happen?
Yeah.
And so, with like, I would immediately go to the top 40 and see what's happening in the top 40. And, I think, gosh, it's tough. In a way, one really obvious choice would be, there's always room for Elvis, and I've never really super got into Elvis. Obviously, you absorb Elvis in America. You don't like have to try. You don't have to like queue up a CD because
he's the Beatles.
I mean, you can always find some Elvis, and so you never really think about. But in the whole idea of what he would have sounded like later, what. I always think about like the shitty stuff musicians who died early would have put out in the 80s. So it would have been interesting the shitty stuff that Elvis would have done in the 80s. But it would have been interesting. Right. So just to get him out of that, what he did in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And to hear
I think he would embrace the 80s hip-hop scene.
Dude, he would have
awesome.
I mean,
he had
at some
the
point.
Ghetto, that was like a prelude straight to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Elvis.
Well, cool. Well, Levi, do you have anybody? If not, we can go on. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
The first person that came to my mind was the guitarist for Collective Soul.
Okay, nice.
Wow,
nice.
geez.
Yeah.
I was never a huge fan of them, but like going back, I can like listen to some of their songs and be like, that was like decent guitar work.
Yeah.
The guy was a decent guitar player.
Yeah.
I don't know the guy's name off the top of my head.
I know. Yeah, I can get behind that. I can get behind the guitar. Whoever the guitarist is in Candlebox as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, good call. Well, what we're going to talk about, the last item on the agenda, the All Star Game. The theme for this episode, in connection to the All Star Game that happened last week. I don't know if you guys got to watch it. I only watched like I said, about the last 3.5, 4 innings, and it was a bit what I saw. It looked like people were really actually trying, as opposed to just sort of to phoning it in. Except for maybe when they faced Derek Jeter.
Right, ask him
Wainwright. I don't know if you guys saw that. Yeah, right. Poor guy. Anyway, so I don't know if you guys got any observations on it, but also I wanted to talk a little bit about, is the All-Star Game really even necessary anymore? Does it mean anything? Did it mean something and now it doesn't? So wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Go for it, Levi.
I would say I think it means something still, and I think it has meant something to the players,
Right.
and that
Yeah.
that is like a pride thing. With I don't remember, but the year Pete Rose ended the catcher's career with the crash in at home.
Yeah.
I want to say it was maybe like 71. I off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, guys, I think get into it because they know they're playing against the best, and they wanna try and see how good they are against the best.
Yeah.
And I mean, the crowd, we're supposed to eat it up, and some of the stuff is fun. I ended up watching all of it up until the two Cubs struck out, and then I was like, "Wow, I watched all of this just to see my two players strike out." So, which was like up to the seventh inning, I think, or so. But like Gabe said, I think it seemed like they were trying. I think it did mean something to them. I think it, if anything, was a badge of honor. And I don't know what the record is, but has the person who's gotten home field advantage during the series won the last couple? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I mean, they tacked that on a few years ago to give sort of to incentivize the game a little bit more, which I think was a good move.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if the person who's on the Marlins might not give a shit, about.
Yeah,
about,
I don't know.
yeah, right.
I disagree. I don't think that was a good move because I think it should mean something, but it shouldn't mean October.
Yeah, I agree with that, John.
And yeah, there's some who wonder if it was Fox who demanded that home field advantage be on the line or something of significant value be on the line so that they got more viewers. But it's like, it's not the Super Bowl. It never will be. So why do they, you're going to get a certain rating and that's going to be that. And it should only matter as much as that rating reflects. Why does everything have to mean, something like significant?
Right.
Why it's an exhibition game and just get the players out there and, let them relax and let them have fun and let them just be the athletes that they are, to where you have these matchups that are, very intriguing, where, you have these memorable moments, and I think it was 99 when Pedro Martinez pitched in Fenway and he struck out the side. And it's just these moments, and it doesn't need to mean more than just these singular moments of, an interesting double play combination, or Miguel Cabrera going deep on an ace, and just let it be that one moment. And then in a very Zen-like way, it then means nothing. It happens,
right,
and then it goes away. And really, and Levi, you mentioned, for the fans to be there to watch that. We had the All Star Game in Kansas City a couple years ago, and it's a moment for the city to, they get the spotlight on them that Kansas City hasn't had the spotlight, and Minneapolis really hasn't had the spotlight, even though they've had quality teams. To let the national audience see what the city's about and see this ballpark and the renovations to the K or the new stadium in Minneapolis, to see
the city
how
gets
nice
a chance really to market itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. I mean, that's a big deal locally, and it's probably a bigger deal locally than it is nationally. And like you said, Gabe, just to tune in for a couple innings, or Levi, to tune in to see your favorite team's players participate, and if that's it, fine, that's awesome, great. It doesn't need to mean anything more than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be interesting to see after Bud Selig retires here, to see what if the new commissioner maybe tries to do anything different with it or to adjust it. And what I just kind of a touch off topic from the All Star Game, but it does have to do. When they were talking to him about retiring, he said one of his regrets is, and what he wants to see is there be another team in Montreal. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I didn't hear that.
I did hear that. And you hear this, and it happened in Charlotte with the NBA when they lost the Hornets and then they got the Bobcats. And I guess I don't know enough of the background as to why a team fails in a city. Is it because of ownership, or is it because there's not a city there to support it? And I can't speak to Montreal. I don't know if they didn't have a very quality product out there. But if it's a city that isn't willing to support it, then what's the point?
Stadium.
Say that again?
Yeah. I mean, you could say both teams in Florida now could get the axe, and I don't think anybody would blink.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And one of the, I guess, main reasons supposedly of Montreal was the Olympic Stadium was like falling apart, but it's still there today. They still use it for
every stadium's going to eventually fall apart. It's eventually going to happen.
They played that exhibition game in March there. Yeah. It was like the Blue Jays and the Mets, I think.
Yeah. You know, I think the stadium excuse is a crutch, and I think, and then to compound that with the idea of a publicly funded stadium, which I don't know if they would consider in the more kind of progressive Canada, but you know, to then like have the public foot the bill for something that won't be used 25 years from now because it won't have a tenant, makes it all the harder to swallow the idea of, you know, being fooled again.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I could see there being a team in Omaha or Las Vegas first, maybe.
Yeah, Vegas, Portland, New Orleans. I don't know.
San Antonio. Yeah.
Indianapolis.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I mean, I think you'll see a team relocate before you see a new franchise created. Yeah. You know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if like baseball right now, not only with the economy still sort of, you know, being off track a little bit, and also just sort of the popularity of baseball. I don't know if you'd get a city to really like get behind a new team. Like you could relocate a team, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but just just erecting a new franchise like they did in Colorado and
right,
and Tampa and Arizona, you know, 20 years ago or so.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if that would happen again. But I could see somebody moving. I could see the Rays moving, or
if they don't get their deal.
They don't have a new stadium.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be like the first team to probably move, because it's like except for this year they've struggled, but you know, they've been good now, minus this year, for about the last 6 seasons, and still nobody shows up at that ballpark. And just the whole Florida doesn't want professional baseball. No. For some reason.
Yeah.
Despite having some pretty good teams.
Yeah. College football is the preeminent sport in Florida.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, 2 observations I've got for the All Star Game, and then we'll show our cards. To me, the All Star Game's reputation suffered a lot when Selig called the tie a few years ago. I think it was in Milwaukee.
I thought it was fun. Why not? It's the most memorable All Star Game of the last 20 years because it was a tie. Who cares? It didn't mean anything. It was a tie. They all get juice boxes and they move on. Great.
Right, but still, though, the damage was done, though. I mean, I agree. Like, I don't know if it's a big deal to me, but it seemed like a big deal to a lot of people, and just empirical evidence. It seems like its reputation has suffered since then. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Rather than whether or not I'm trying to be objective on the decision. I don't, like whatever. I don't really care the outcome of the game, or if it was a tie. But just. It seems like that hurt it, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and really, I think if they weren't so like stuck in their ways, and baseball is always, it defers to history and how we always do things.
Yeah.
If they could have called an impromptu home run derby right then and there, and brought out a batting coach to throw, and just had a home run derby to decide, it would have been one of the most memorable games in the history of the All-Star Game, and I think in some ways they would have been lauded for it, because it's like, okay, that's cool, they just riffed on their situation and they made it happen, and it was an exhibition anyhow. So
where the hell were you, Jonathan? God,
it would be cool to see something spontaneous happen like that, or
exactly.
I'm all about bending the rules for the All-Star Game. I don't think those things should be etched in stone. And my other observation was Levi had mentioned that the whole process is good for the players, And I'll agree with that in the sense that, like, yeah, it's good for their career in the sense that, I would assume when contracts roll around, you have a younger player, if he's made 2 or 3 All-Star teams, that probably helps. And then in the age of internet voting, the selection process has become bigger than the game. Like this year, Chris Sale won the final AL slot. And, there was a big campaign, #TargetSale. So that has become exciting for the fans, even if, like, a lot of those people who vote don't even tune into the game. So those are just kind of my two observations.
Well, yeah, and I thought it was interesting. Both guys from Chicago got the final vote this year. The NL was Rizzo for the Cubs.
Right. Well, voting in Chicago, it has a reputation.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
Early and often.
Forget about it. Yeah, also the White Sox somehow sent 3 guys from a pretty shitty team as well.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, we have 3 players going for a team that's below 500.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right, so it's time to show your cards. I've got mine ready. So, Levi, why don't we go ahead and start with you? Show us your card, man. Okay.
My card is one of a series, and I'll give you a little story about it. From around 1991, 92 to about 95, 96, Denny's, in the summertime, when you would eat there and order a Grand Slam, you would get a Denny's Grand Slam hologram card. It's really hard to see, I'm sure. But this is a Will Clark on the San Francisco Giants hologram card.
Nice.
And these cards have memories for me because we would travel to Colorado every year for summer vacation. And we would stop at, like, Denny's along the way, so I would get, like, multiple hologram cards as the vacation progressed.
Awesome.
And you won't be able to see it, but on this one, they got really fancy towards the end. This is a card of Ryan Sandberg, and when you move it, it's actually, like, a hologram of him catching a baseball and, like, turning across his body and throwing it.
Nice. Wow.
So, yeah, they were pretty fancy for Denny's.
So when they give you the card, did it come in a pack?
They were in, like, a really thin cellophane, like, plastic pack. Yeah,
and you could see through it?
One card to a pack.
Could you see through it?
I think on some of them, yeah, you could see through to where, like, if the the waitress gave you one you had, you could be like, no, I have that.
Right, that's what I was getting at. Could you get the waitress to bring you several and you could choose one?
I have a couple more. I actually have a Lenny Dykstra and a Matt Noakes on the Yankees.
Noakes.
Nice, a Noakes card. Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah, a Noakes Denny's hologram.
Awesome. Even Denny saw the potential in Matt Noakes.
Right, yeah. Absolutely.
Awesome.
That was a coveted card, man.
Awesome.
Jonathan, what about yours, man?
Mine is a one I have several of, and this was my first favorite player, and it's obviously there's a huge soap opera behind this player now, and my feelings are extremely mixed on this player, and to the point where I really don't like him anymore. But more importantly, it's also a hint at a future a rock and roll Shin-Soo Choo direction, and it's a 1986 Topps Roger Clemens. Again,
card.
I have several of these cards. Like I'll just like pull them out of the couch, and it's like, oh, it's another 86 Clemens. But more importantly, though, it's we're working on some rock and roll Shin-Soo Choo logos, and I use the 86 Topps as inspiration for one of those that hopefully we'll all be seeing very soon.
Nice.
Yeah, man. I feel the same way too, man. Like, I have such mixed feelings about that guy.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. It's awful. It's like if Nolan Ryan would have shot somebody or something, you know? It's like fucking Roger Clemens. It's like, why do you have to fucking touch steroids, you fuck? I like you a lot.
He's a divisive figure. Yeah.
And he also went to play for the Yankees, which didn't help him.
He did. Yeah, he had no loyalty.
Yeah,
no. For sure.
No.
He went to the Yankees and he went to the Blue Jays, didn't he, as well?
Yeah.
He went to the Blue Jays first, where he won 2 more Cy Youngs and all resurrected his career magically.
Played for like 10 more years.
Astros.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, a little bit of time in Houston. Yep. Well, Well, my card, I really chose this one for the photography. With an upper deck card, you get the dual-sided photography, so I always like that. This one is of Rick Sutcliffe with kind of a shit-eating grin on his face right here.
Jesus.
That or he's drunk, which if you
could be a possibility.
If you YouTube Rick Sutcliffe, most likely his plane's not going to come up first, even though he was a really good pitcher. Really going to be him being wasted. And then on the back, he's squirting Mark Grace with a bottle of water. I don't know if you guys can see that. Yeah, see, he's got the water bottle there.
Windex, or
he's squirting Mark Grace with a bottle of water.
Weird.
So, that's Rick Sutcliffe. 91 upper deck gets my vote. So.
Good card.
Nice, 91 upper deck. Awesome.
Yes. Well, I think that wraps up another episode of Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Choo. I look forward to the next one, guys, and it's a pleasure as always.
Definitely.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
See you.
Bye-bye.